Lads, please like and comment. That would really help the progression of this channel. Thank you.
Well, lads, what's the crack? Here, listen, sorry for taking such a long hiatus, I was busy doing other things, like your mother. But today I want to talk about, what's on the news, baby? Israel and Palestine conflict. Come on, how can we do without it? Like, you know what I mean? What's the reason behind it? Why are they just going at it, man? You know what? Sometimes I want to go there and just tell them, boys, stop fucking fighting. It ain't worth it. But it's an infantile way of thinking. Now you see, this video is as much for me as it is for you. I'm out here trying to understand the shit as well, because you know what? It's pretty fucking complicated, right? Because you think about it, but like back in the day, Jews were living on this land, right? But then Jews were exiled, and then Arabs lived there. But then a Jewish fellow was like, but it's alright to live on this land, but there's no religious reason for it, because of the Bible. It's just, I want to take over this land for Jews, because the Sultan didn't let me have land anywhere else. And then, Holocaust happened, and then they're like, oh, well, now it's awkward to not give you land. I guess we would. And it was the UN, and it was all fucking complicated from there on. And then there's a war with the Palestinians, and then the UN agreed on some shit, but it wasn't even. And then there's a war with these two other countries that were Arab, and then this organization stopped existing, and then this other terrorist organization replaced that organization, which led to more Israeli deaths, which led to Israel constructing the Iron Dome, which led to Israel bombing civilians, which led to more Israeli deaths, which led to Israel constructing the Iron Dome, which led to Israel bombing civilians, which led to Hamas doing terrorist attacks in Israel, which led to this situation that we have now. So, and you see a bit of a disclaimer for leftists, this is why, in my personal opinion, I think it's a bit awkward for you to only support Palestine, right? You think you're doing the right thing because they're getting bombed, but in reality what happened was, it was Hamas in this situation. I know Israel was bombing Palestine beforehand, but in this situation, Hamas was the one that invaded Israel. Hamas was the one that is butchering and killing their civilians in the south of Israel, which is why it's a bit weird that you only support one side in this situation, when in reality both sides are bad and both people are suffering. But it's just, from a leftist point of view, the reason why they're always supporting Palestine over Israel is because they tend to look too much at history and the dynamics between liberal countries and exploited countries. Interviewers asking, do you condemn Hamas? Of course they're gonna fucking ask that, because Hamas started the whole thing, and that's why people, like, for example, in Ukraine, support Israel, even though, technically Israel is the oppressor and technically Russia is the oppressor. Just a bit of clearance for you, alright? Just spat all over the fucking place, but you know what I mean? I could get into the history of this entire conflict, and, the Arabs were like, well, if you were here, the Jews were like, we were here 2,000 years ago, and the Arab was like, well, if you were here 2,000 years ago, you should have came back 2,000 years ago, you had all this time. And he's like, you cheeky bastard, I'm gonna blow up your fucking land. It's 1948, and it'll take way too fucking long, but why would I? It's pointless. What's important is what's going on now and what's going to happen in the future. In fairness, if you're playing around with your mates and you break one of their arms, you're less going to be worried about why and what led to that happening, rather than calling fucking 999 and getting an ambulance to the scene of the which led to this situation that we have now. So if we're talking about who to blame, let's just not. It's Illuminati. Let's not blame anyone for this, okay? I know you fucking leftists are in the camp with, like, Palestine. I guess I am as well. Irish and stuff, but Israel is also hard to blame for fucking indiscriminately bombing children. I mean, after getting terrorist attack, nevertheless, but children, lads, come on. And the fucking the president with the Mein Kampf in Arabic thing, like, I don't know what the fuck that was about either, but let's not do blaming. Let's talk about what we can actually do to solve this issue. Now, that's the hard part. That's the part that no one fucking knows what to do. I'm not even Joe Rogan. But, we have to do something, and we have to do it now. Or else. The Israel-Palestine conflict isn't like anything else we've seen before. It isn't like Russia and Ukraine. It definitely isn't like, well, anything else really. America and Iraq. So, and before I start this video, I have to make a reminder.
everyone on every side of the political aisle, we all make bad takes, and that it's a complicated fucking issue. Alright? Doesn't matter which side of it you're on. The right, the left, right, left. Hit him with that right, left. I got my best stroker, I don't need no pipe check. My dick work, girl, I don't need a mic test. You know, shit like that. And this goes especially for my side of the political aisle. The political left. You know, we, believe it or not, are wrong sometimes as well. I know we're always like, oh, Noam Chomsky book. I'm gonna watch the latest Bosch video to find out what opinion I should have about this topic. But you know, in reality, right, I know this kind of brain juice is illegal to sell at this time around, right? But I'm gonna blow your mind. Right, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, as they say, so I might as well tell you that yes, we can be wrong and cringe on certain things. Like this podcast over here, which I'm not gonna name to give these people any credit. Fuck them. Or this fella, who I'm also not gonna give any credit. Have a lot of terrible takes, especially on Israel and Palestine, right? For example, both sides, both the pro-Israel and pro-Palestine camp, both make whataboutist arguments. Like this left-wing one, for example, from this fella.
Yeah, is flooded with obituaries. Put a finger down if you've texted your friends terrified that it's the last message they'll see.
The IDF should refuse their orders, and most people shouldn't accept the draft of the IDF because, you know, you're an Israeli citizen, you live in an alleged democracy, you can vote for people, you can vote people out who support terrible stuff like this, and you can also not serve. Plenty of Israelis do it, more should do it. And everything she's saying there is what Palestinians go through as well, right? So what that should make them realise is, oh, what happened on October 7th was terrible, but also everything I've just done my little finger thing for, Palestinians could do that as well, pretty much for everything I've said. And more of them could do it as well than Israelis, especially in Gaza. So maybe you should realise that these people are suffering at your hands too, and you should both realise that you killing each other for the Israeli government's agenda is a bad thing and won't make you more safe. But again, brainwashing, this stupid propaganda, it's not really going to change anything, but I find it curious that they're...
That was one on the pro-Palestine side. Now here's one on the pro-Israel side. Famous Ukrainian YouTuber on the Russian-speaking side of the internet, right? Has his own memes associated with the Russian side of the meme internet, whatever the fuck, right? Alexei Shevtsov. He doesn't have a lot of English-speaking content, so I'll translate this for you, alright? That's the least I can do for you. My beautiful audience. I know my brother's a rapist, but like, what about Joe Murphy who robbed an old grandmother, huh? Where's the justice for her, eh?
Как много лицемерия происходит что в арабском мире, что со стороны людей, которые выходят с плакатами «Фри Палестина», «От реки до моря» и так далее, все переживают за палестинцев. Окей, понятно, но почему никто не говорит, что вот прямо сейчас, когда я записываю это видео, 2 миллиона афганских жителей депортируют из Пакистана? Пакистан сказал, мы их просто депортируем. 2 миллиона афганских жителей. Это даже не беженцы, это люди, которые там живут десятилетиями. Все, никто не выходит митинговать против Пакистана.
It's pretty clear to see that both sides are prone to making whataboutist arguments and always mask their whataboutism and calling out the other side's hypocrisy, which is pretty fucking stupid. Let's be honest. What about some real history? Obviously it's too complicated to delve into fully, but since I have a left-wing audience, I might as well give you some other perspective. Did you know that there are wars that Palestine participated in, was in the wrong in, and didn't even involve Israel? Like the Palestine-Jordanian war, which isn't even called that on Wikipedia? Bet you didn't know that. Well, what happened was, basically, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is what existed before Hamas, it was a left-wing group. It overran Jordan and started a war with the Jordanian government, with the Kingdom of Jordan, led by, you know, the leader of their organization, the chairman Yasser Arafat. On the 17th of September 1970, you know, this is when they started their operations based in Palestinian refugee camps, in which the Kingdom of Jordan let them stay at, right? And they overran the cities there, like Erbil and Amman, and started the war in order to take over the Kingdom of Jordan and turn it into Palestinian territory. That's something that pro-Palestine protesters, who are in the right in terms of the whole bombing children is wrong part, they never talk about that. You know, we're using some of their tactics, you know, some of that, oh, it's not whataboutism, it's actually pointing out their hypocrisy bullshit, you know? We can use that as well, in this case, against my own side. Oh yeah, by the way, those groups, the Fatah, PLO, you know, their leader, Yasser Arafat, he supported the Ba'athist and Saddam Hussein during his reign so much that the president of Palestine had to apologize, I don't think to the UN, but to the entire world, basically, for Palestinians supporting, through him, Saddam Hussein's regime, right? First Kuwait banned Palestinian refugees, and then Turkey disallowed them, and now no one wants to take them in because now they're seen as like a fifth column almost. So it's like, for example, here in Ireland, like leftists, we'd be supporting Palestinians, you know, not getting bombed, which is good, but you know, we also wouldn't let them in our country, which does lead into some real great replacement theory bullshit, but it's not what it seems, right? It's just that, you know, with the whole Hamas supporting all of this shite, and the PLO support and all this other shit, you know, and Arab countries in general not being the most democratic states, you know, the UAE being full of slavery, Saudi Arabia only letting women drive in like 2012 or something, you know, and now all of these terrorist cells running all these Arab countries, just like the Hamas and Palestine. Anyway, since you didn't know, you know now, you know, even if you're a leftist, I bet you didn't know what organization ran the West Bank, right, before you knew anything about Gaza or anything going on in there, let alone the history of this entire conflict. That's okay. What I'm really trying to say is we should have nuanced conversations of what about is going on now and what we'll do about it in the future. Not about all of this history and these people came and did that and then these people came and they were bad and then that's bad and then ooh and all of this and that. Like, no one, it doesn't fucking matter, lads, right? We should talk about what we should do in the future and try and understand what is going on now. And in order to do both of those things, I'm here to help. Now, there's this Soviet film called Bespredel, or Chaos, about the Russian prison system. What would we have to undertake in order to understand this war, right? Well, luckily for you, I have two distinct parallels with one is a film, the other one is a real war that happened, just so you'd like understand it a bit, and as a person who's inexperienced in politics, know what side of the fence or black oath you will fall on. Yeah, shit like that. So before we get into this whole charumba-rum about Israel and Palestine and start comparing it to some B-tier Soviet film from the 80s and some war that's only relevant because it's the war that got Putin elected, you know, the only reason we get away with this is because no one fucking watches this channel, right? Right. So before we start doing all of that and getting into the comparison between the Palestinian-Israel conflict and this film and a previous war, we have to delve deep into some historical analysis, right? Like I did in your mother. So in order to understand what this film even has to do with the Hamas and Palestine and all of this situation, all of this buzz, I'll give you a small little review of the film. Now, the film starts off with us getting introduced to the Russian prison system. And in the Russian prison system, there are a couple of castes, right? You know, there's the roosters, who are the bottom caste, the absolute bottom feeders, right? Amongst the different steps. It's basically like a pit for degenerates, where you're allowed to do anything, like fuck, curse, as long as it's not like around any of the other prisoners. Then whose main job within the prison system is they're all the outcasts, you know, homosexuals, as they said back in the day. No one fucking says trans people, you know, all of that bollocks. Probably some non-binary folk, probably like Destiny in there as well. Now the thing is, no one was allowed to touch them, right?
regular prisoners weren't allowed to touch them. They were the absolute bottom caste, and if you touched them, you got their energy, I guess, passed on to you. So in a way, you kind of get the cheese touch, right? Oh yeah, I forgot to add, it was straight up segregation for the roosters. Like, they had their own, like, utensils and furniture and plates and cups and all of that bollocks, and they had, like, holes in them to close and humiliate them. And when you bait them, you can't use your hands. You can only use, like, a stool. That's why they're also called stoolers. You know, apartheid shit, you know, just like Israel. But, you know, since the thieves-in-law are Palestine in this situation. But you still get the point. And then there was the devils. The devils, who were people who did like menial labor, you know, like cleaning the fucking prison hallways and doing all this shite that no one else wanted to do, cleaning dishes and stuff like that. Well, I mean, there were workers for that, but you know what I mean. Then there were just the regular peasant men who make up 60% of the general prison population in most Soviet prison camps back then. They did all the work in the prison, you know. All the prison labor. Then there was the sixes and the torpedoes and the bulls or whatever, you know, they were the brawn of, you know, the main guys who were the blackguards, the thieves-in-law. Right, now these lads were put into that position of power around like the 30s when, you know, Soviet Union still had like actual concentration camps called gulags, where the prison guards didn't really fucking feel like watching the prisoners, honestly. There's just so many of them. Like, Stalin arrested fucking everyone. And so what happened was, the guards kind of allowed an underground prison mafia to form and take over the prison system and create all these castes in the first place, right? And they named themselves the Thieves-in-Law, which is the literal translation in Russian. And then you have the blackguards, or the thieves-in-law, the traditional Russian mafia before the 90s, right? This film does take place within a Soviet prison that was about to fall apart, right? Which is kind of, in the business we call it foreshadowing. You know, due to current events. But anyway, you see them in films like Eastern Promises, Siberian Education, even though that's nowhere close to reality, but so in the film we learned that, you know, the Coombs and stuff, you know, they have a certain benefit of having, you know, thieves-in-law around, and then the thieves-in-law have a benefit to keeping, you know, the Coombs around, because, you know, one is keeping one in power from losing their job, and the other one is being allowed by the other to reign free within the prison, impose their own laws. You know, they're mutually beneficial to each other. Then something called Bispredel, which doesn't translate to any other language, comes in. It translates to like chaos, right? Which is when the prisoners start acting all bang out of order. And at the end of the film, now the Kuma is the prison administrator. And the problem within this specific prison got so bad that they had to hire a new administrator to administer Soviet law within the prison, you know, because all of this thieves-in-law blackguard bullshit is kind of ruining everything for everyone. And so in a sense he was trying to force the thieves-in-law to break their own criminal code by forcing them to work, which didn't really go over well with them. And at the end of the film there's a philosophical question, which is, who's in the wrong? You know, the prison administration and the Coom for keeping all of these prisoners in these kinds of conditions? Or the thieves-in-law who perpetuate such conditions instead of rising up against them so they can impose their own, like, you know, prison laws and codes onto all the other prisoners? Which is a really good parallel between Israel and Hamas. Another good parallel would be the second Russo-Chechen war, not the first, the second one. But that's different, and since the prison joke is a bit more to do with the video, we'll talk about it more. And so what happened is that these prisoners are just allowed to run the show, and they created a sort of anarcho-capitalist system within the prison where goods and services were exchanged for climbing up the prison hierarchy.
right? And it's what people did. So there's a lot of smuggling of contraband goods, like that you would get nowhere else in Russian prison, that were so exclusive, so bougie. You know, things like tea and sugar and stuff like that, and butter and sweets and all of that, and drugs, lots and lots of drugs. And what happened was is the prison administration took sight of this. You know, they stopped not giving a fuck. They were like, whoa, 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 hold on, you're selling drugs now? You're slinging dope? Man, count me the fuck in, right? And so what happened is, right, the prisoners had to send the money up the hierarchy, which went to the Kumavyo, which is the prison administration, who abided by the laws of the Soviet Union and let these thieves-in-law run the fucking show. All the money went to them, right? And what happened is that all in exchange for the money that the thieves-in-law give them, the prison administration pays for more of the drugs, which creates a cycle from the bottom feeders. Not exactly, the peasant creates a cycle from the peasant men who work, produce labor, trade goods, which produce goods which then are traded for drugs, which are traded for money, which are given up, traded all the way up through the prison hierarchy up to the guards, and creates a vicious cycle of things around, right? The reason why these drugs are so accessible and so rampant in these prisons is because most of the people in the Soviet prisons were there on drug felonies and drug charges. But the thieves-in-law were there for different reasons. It was their home. They were there for things like thievery and murder and all of that bollocks and gang affiliation. And they were the ones who set the show. And now all this is ran the show. And now all of this drug slinging business bollocks is just a result of the thieves-in-law trying to get along with the prison administration, which eventually led to internal conflicts. You know, the other health inspectors and the other higher ups came in to check, you know, this prison. And it turns out there's a drug business going on there. So what did they do? They wanted to get rid of it by getting rid of the prison hierarchy that the thieves-in-law created, that made these drug problems become a rampant epidemic in the first place. And what they did was, the first thing they did was try to make the thieves-in-law work, which the thieves-in-law, they had this criminal code which didn't really fit with their moral values, you see. Working was for the peasant men class, the 60% of prisoners, not for the thieves-in-law. So, it didn't really go well. And what eventually happened was, after the turning into a bottom feeder of one of the main characters, who was at the start a peasant man, who became a rooster, the prison erupted into outright anarchy, a battle between thieves-in-law, the peasant men, and the prison administration, which led to the entire prison being burnt down and everyone getting arrested. Now, this sounds a lot like the Israel-Palestine conflict, doesn't it? It doesn't? But let me explain something. How does this compare to the Israel? Oh, dude, that was so zesty. How does this compare? How does this compare to Israel? How does this compare to Israel and Palestine? But it really fucking doesn't. It was a really shit comparison. I wanted to make myself and you understand it more, but it just made me and you understand it even less. So, sorry. Basically, if we were to compare, the Soviet prison is Gaza, right? It's an open-air concentration camp, as they say. The administration is Israel, as Israel controls both Gaza and the West Bank, as we read here. In 1950, Jordan annexed the region outright, ruling it until 1967, Six-Day War, when it was captured and occupied by Israel. Since then, Israel has administered the West Bank as the Judea and Samaria area, expanding its claim into East Jerusalem in 1980. Gaza Strip and the West Bank had been occupied by Egypt and Jordan. Recently, since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War until the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza Strip in 1967 and has since maintained control to this day. Alright, so Israel controls these areas. So it's the prison administration and the drug trade. The caste system is, the people and, the terrorists and the people in power in Israel, the politicians. The drug trade system, well, is the fact that Israel, just like the prison administration in this camp, let Hamas rule Gaza because they weren't as much of a threat to Israel back in the 80s as the Palestinian Liberation Movement was, the left-wing group. Israel being pretty far right, the Islamists being pretty far right, but the Islamists also hated the Jews, so then they created a problem. And the drug trade was the trade of mainly hostages, right? Hamas would capture an Israeli hostage and Israel would give Hamas something in return. But when there was no hostages met in return, hostility started between not only the Israeli and Palestinian people, but also these two groups, the IDF and Hamas, which led to multiple civilian deaths, and in this case led to Hamas massacring all these people, which led to the biggest massacre of Jews since World War II. Pretty gruesome shit, which led to the IDF bombing Palestine. Right, pretty gruesome shit. Right, and at the end of this film, we see that the Soviet Union fell apart and the Soviet prison system was kind of revamped, for the new modern era. Now, what does this mean for Israel and Palestine? Does that mean that Israel or Palestine as governments are gonna fall apart and there'll be new governments created? No, Israel is definitely gonna stay. Question is with Palestine. What are they gonna do with Palestine? They're not gonna let it rule the areas of Gaza and the West Bank by establishing any legitimate government. There's always going to be a group within those two regions that are definitely going to do a pogrom against the Jews, and there will be no one to stop them. Not the UN, because the official government that the UN would put into Gaza or West Bank would just simply not let the UN peacekeepers enter the borders of its territory, leaving the Jewish citizens of those territories vulnerable to any kind of persecution or attacks, which isn't ideal. But if Israel occupies both of those regions and incorporates them into their land, the wall will still be there because the threat is still there. Therefore, all Arabs would be filtered, just like the Japanese were in internment camps, creating a sort of apartheid state. A mix of Japanese internment camps and, anti-black laws in both America and South Africa. Neither of them are good, but the second one is more probable, as Israel is, let's be honest, more democratic than Hamas or any Palestinian government could be, less likely to murder people, although it has a pretty bad track record. So bad that Joe Biden had to send US troops to monitor whether the IDF are going to commit war crimes or not. You know what I mean. Never did that in Ukraine, by the way, just saying. So, yeah, that's where that leaves us anyway.
Necessarily men, women and children, really cool and admirable shit that, most Muslims definitely strive for,
Yeah. Most people of that chosen faith definitely strive for. And so that really creates a situation where it's like a battle between shit and piss, with innocent people on both sides of the chicken pen getting caught in between the Egg McMuffin. Pretty bad situation all in all, and it's continuing until now. But you know what? Let's be like, some people. Joe Rogan thinks he's pretty smart. The world politicians think they're pretty smart. They're like gloating, waffling about some shite. I forgot what it was called. Something like I think it rhymes with gay prostitution. Two-state solution. Great. We could try that. Nah, we can't try that, can we? We can't try that because what would happen if Israel takes over the entire area, which was parted, by the UN for safety reasons, in this year, on the screen, because I forgot I didn't do my research. And what's going to happen is it's going to be an apartheid state. And if Palestine, aka Hamas, because that's who they're ruled by in Gaza, take over the entire landmass that is Israel, then there's going to be simply a Holocaust 2. So out of the two options that we have, neither seem ideal, one could say. They're definitely achievable, but do we want them to happen? No. But with a two-state solution, what we have now, a semi-two-state, one-state, so whatever the fuck we have going on now, is all of those problems at the same time. Which is why we're talking about this obscure Soviet film from the 80s and the Second Chechen War. It's a very interesting comparison. And the fact that I explained it in a dog shit way, the whole situation from the 40s till now, I hope it'll make it more understandable for people that are as dumb as myself. AKA Yila, which is why you watch me, because, you know, great minds think alike. So what did we learn? We learned that even if you're a leftist and you're right on most things, you still can't pick a side, because this is truly a really complicated subject and a nuanced one with no easy solution. Go away, Hitler. Fuck off. I mean, the takeaway, and don't ask me to elaborate on it. I already did. I don't want to do it for another 20 minutes because I go on rambling and waffling. None benefits absolutely fucking no one, trust me. Bottom line is, it's a very complicated subject and you should not support any side. Because both sides, quite frankly, are fucking shite. Right? The terrorists who want to impose Sharia fucking law on people and stone gay people. The fucking fascists who are like liberal in a sense, but you know, don't mind having a apartheid state. And then the 3 or 4 other countries, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, who all had a go at Israel and Palestine. Syria who killed Palestinian civilians. You know, Jordan who Palestine tried to overthrow. Iraq who, you know, Palestine helped them, you know, with Saddam Hussein and stuff. No one ever talks about this shit. Right? Both sides, remember this, if you're watching this and don't know which side of the fence to be on, the pro-Palestinian side or the pro-Israel side, neither. They're both lying to you. They're both falsifying information. They're both leaving out other bits of information and only throwing like itsy bitsy witsy teeny weeny fucking wee crumbs at you, right? So that you fucking ate them up like morning stew, but in reality it's food poisoning is what you get out of it. Not any good nutrition, you know. Watch my channel for that, like, you know, and you'd be fucking buff like me. But up here. Anyways, that was me. Dr. Sheep, still fucking confused, signing out. See you lads in the next video.
Роздьори, дібрівські ліси, гайчурські хлопці чистої роси, свиснеш із дуба, чуть на 3 віки, скрізь мої краяни, махновці, козаки. Розлита воля, гірше із отрут, соловей розбійник народився тут.